Hi, Mr. Johnson here, and we are going to talk about our new art project, Prompt Turning Shapes into Forms. If you haven't watched the shape and form lesson videos, you should probably do that before starting this project. But if you want to just jump in, go for it. Okay, so quick overview of the difference between shapes and forms. Shapes are flat, enclosed areas that are two-dimensional. They have length and they have height. And there are geometric shapes like rectangles, triangles, squares, and ovals. There are organic shapes, right? Things that you find in nature, shapes that don't have specific names. Often they're more curvilinear, and they have less angles, right, to them. Now, forms are three-dimensional. They have length, width, and height, right? They can be viewed from multiple angles. So basically, the shape is the flat two-dimensional version, and the form is the three-dimensional version with depth. So a shape is a rectangle, but a form is a box, right? A shape is a triangle, but a form is a pyramid. A circle is a shape, but a sphere is a form. Look at that. Now you're caught up. So let's talk about turning shapes into forms. So we're going to start by drawing a shape like a rectangle right here. And that rectangle can become a box or a cylinder. So by adding lines to give the illusion of depth, you can either turn that rectangle into a box by adding straight, parallel, and perpendicular lines, or by adding an oval at the top and a curved line at the bottom, you can turn it into the illusion of a 3D cylinder. Now, these both need those extra lines and shading to make that happen. Now, in order to turn a circle into a sphere, you have to shade it because you can't add another side, right? So the shading here shows the difference between a drawn flat circle and a sphere. All that is that's added a highlight here, a dark shadow at the bottom, and a cast shadow on the tabletop, which I think is pretty cool. So here are so many examples. I think this is beautiful of three-dimensional forms on a flat surface. So that means it started by drawing shapes, added those extra lines or made those little changes, and then shaded them. So a few things that I want to point out to you. So if you look at these cubes up at the top, let's start with those. They are all the same. The difference here is the lighting. So I want to show you how you can change the look of these depending on the direction that your light is coming from. So obviously this first box, the light source is coming from the right side, and that's because the cast shadow is on the left, right? The darkest side is on the left, so the light's coming from this way. In this box here, the light is coming from this direction. It's hitting this side of the box, which is lighter, and the cast shadow is back that way. This box here, the light is coming from the left side, hitting here, and casting its shadow behind it to the right. So shading something is the easiest way to make it appear like a three-dimensional form. You can look at the same thing with the cone shapes at the bottom, how they've created the illusion of form here. The spheres are all really well done with light coming from different directions. And then these cylinders are the same thing. Where the light hits them, it's lighter, darker on the other side, and has a beautiful cast shadow. So if you were unsure about how to shade in a form, come back to this image. This is such a great reference. It will help you all the time. No matter how long you've practiced, something like this as a reference is always helpful. So, drawing a 3D cube. Let's look at some of these steps. Again, you can always come back to this as well. On the top, they've started by drawing a square. Then they've drawn a second square that overlaps it on the corner, right? You can see that overlapping the corners. Then you connect all four corners with parallel diagonal lines. So they all connect to each other, and now you've got your 3D cube. Now, if your cube is clear, you can leave it like this. Most cubes are not clear, so you would then erase some lines, which you see that they've done here to create cubes that are solid, or that are open on the front, or that are open on the top, or open on one side, right? So you can see how they've done that by erasing some of the lines that you can see, create the illusion of a box being open in different directions. And then shading the cube depends on the light source. right? So you can see here they've shown what direction the light is coming from, and the side that the light is hitting is the lightest, the side near that is a middle tone, and then the side farthest away from the light is the darkest. And then you see the boxes that you can do the same thing with. Cool, right? So a pyramid, they've shown you two different ways to draw a 3D looking pyramid. Here we start with a triangle. We add 3 lines that meet at a point inside that triangle, and then you can shade in the different edges. Now, these obviously just depend on where the light source is coming from. Instead of looking at a pyramid from above, if you're looking at it from the side with a corner in the front, it shows you how to draw that, starting with 1 line, adding a V at the bottom. Those become the 2 bottom sides, connecting those right with a line on the left, line on the right, and then you shade it. There's your pyramid, looking at it with a corner in the front. So the most important thing, right, when you're talking about shading, and that's how you turn objects, right, from a shape into a form, is looking at your light source. So here the light is obviously coming from the upper right, because you've got this highlight here on the top right side. It's shaded on the bottom and on the left. And the cast shadow, which is the shape made when an object blocks the light, that cast shadow is down here on the left on the bottom. And you can see that they've included a whole range of values, which are all these shades from white to black and everything in between. And that wide range of values is what helps create the illusion of the form, right? That illusion that it looks 3-dimensional. The other thing that this artist does to help create the illusion of form is by shading in the background, and shading in the background the opposite way that they've shaded the subject. What I mean by that is that it's dark here around the light side of the sphere, and it's lighter here by the dark side of the sphere. So do you see how the background is opposite? Good. I just Dora the Explorer did. So if you're not sure, right, how to shade in an object with a light source, especially something like a sphere like this is such a good reference for you. Now, we're going to talk in a minute about making actual forms, because we've talked a lot so far about how to draw something that looks like a form, right? How to take a shape, add shading to it, or add those other sides to it, make it look 3D. Here are 2 patterns for how you can actually make a 3-dimensional paper form. So the first one is a cube, and it's made up of squares that are all the same size. So it's 6 squares set out in a lowercase t, right, or a cross pattern. And then there are little flaps on the edges of these. So what you would do to make this, if you were to draw out something like this, it's the 6 squares set up in this pattern with little flaps on it. You'd cut this out, and then you'd fold along all of these dotted edges. That's everywhere where the flaps are, you'd fold those in, and then you would also fold in these edges here and this one here. And that's going to make a box, because each of these squares is going to fold up, and then this extra one at the bottom here is going to become the top that folds down. And the little tabs here are just spaces that you can add some glue to hold your cube together. Here's a shape to make a paper pyramid. You can start. So if you want to, draw your own version of this, it starts off with a square in the center, and then they've drawn a triangle off of all 4 sides of that square. So the square is rotated here so that it looks like a diamond. Same shape, doesn't matter. But each flat side of the square becomes the base of a triangle. Now, the hard part about this is that the triangles all have to be exactly the same. So I'd recommend either measuring it when you go to draw this, if you're making one, or making one and cutting it out and tracing it so that they're all the same. Again, there are some flaps, little tabs here that they've added so that you can fold those in and add glue to them. This, right, the square becomes the base. You just fold up all of the triangle sides, and then these little tabs, you can add some glue and fold those in to hold it together. So why am I showing you those? I'm glad you asked. I'm showing you those because part of our project is going to be showing different ways to create forms. Now, the first one is going to be by shading the drawing. So like this box up here, They've taken the square, which there are directions on how to do in the beginning of the video, so go back to that, and shaded it with a cast shadow and the different values. And they've also made paper cubes that are these three-dimensional forms, and I've taken a photograph of them. That's exactly what I'm going to ask you to do for this project. Here, they've done the same thing with a paper pyramid, which are the two step-by-step patterns that I just showed you. Here, this is a shaded image of a pyramid that's been uh, filled in to resemble a 3D form. And on the bottom are the actual 3D versions. They folded these out of paper and photographed them. So here's what you need to do for this project, and there's an example right on the screen. So step number 1, draw 4 shapes. They can be whichever ones that you want. They're going to be just the line drawings. So like you see here, just the outlines. Then you're going to draw and shade 4 forms. So they can be the same ones, they can be different. That totally up to you. And you're going to shade those to show depth with highlights, shadows, cast shadows, right? Like in the example here, and like we've seen throughout all of these examples. And then you're going to build 4 forms out of paper and photograph them. So like we have down here, there's the cube and the pyramid that I showed you the pattern for, then a cone and a cylinder. So be creative. You can do the simple shapes and forms if you want, but I really encourage you to really try and push yourself. Try something a little bit more imaginative. Maybe the 4th one that you do is something a little bit different, just to see how well you do. Challenge yourself. So if you need help with any of these, please let me know. Again, don't forget that shading these shapes with this wide range of values is what gives that illusion of form. And then you'll be using any kind of paper, it doesn't matter what you use, to build your 3D forms. Photograph them. Make sure that, like these, the photo doesn't have anything distracting in the background. Crop it down so we're really just looking at that form, and post them to your portfolio. I can't wait to see what you make, and if you need any help, please let me know. Thanks.